Hey, it's the Geekbus here. Today, I want to address the question of what is psychoanalysis? It's a good question, and I get asked that all the time. I want to say the answer is, well, the person comes to the analyst's office, lies down on the couch 4 or 5 days a week, and says everything that comes into their mind. That is something, but it reminds me of, I think anytime anybody trains to be a healthcare professional, you learn the following thing. When you're in an emergency room, say, or any other kind of acute care clinic, you ask the person, well, what brings you in today? And they say, an ambulance, or my dad, or something like that. We had another episode here talking about abstraction and concreteness. It's kind of concrete to say what literally brought you in, a vehicle did. And somehow I'm reminded of that with psychoanalysis too. Yes, what you do is you come in and lie on the analyst's couch, at least in classical psychoanalysis, and say what comes to mind. But that isn't what psychoanalysis is. That's just what you do. So what is that all about is the deeper question. What's the purpose of saying what comes into your mind? What is frequently called free association or associative type therapies. Now, there are plenty of people who will tell you that this is a complete waste of time, you need to be goal-directed, and all kinds of other things like that. And that's all well and good. And indeed, for various kinds of counseling one might wish to receive, you can get exactly what you want. Let's talk about something. Weirdly, in classic psychoanalysis, people don't really talk about things. Of course, we do. Sometimes people say, well, what am I supposed to do if I come in to see the psychoanalyst? Every day I come in and I lie on the couch and I start to talk. What am I doing exactly? Freud probably wrote this somewhere, but I think he said, well, imagine you're on a train looking out the window and I'm sitting next to you, but I can't see out the window. And what you're seeing out the window is what's coming to your mind analogously. And so describe what you see. Tell me what you see, which is, a kind of a nice way of describing the idea of free association. So speak in as uncensored a way as you can, whatever comes into your mind. One of the things I think most analysts recognize, if you do manage to have someone agree to do that, and they try to do it, is the very first thing that happens is they're not doing that. I say they, but that certainly was true of me when I began analysis. You're doing anything but. You're talking about things, and you're telling stories and the news of the week and all kinds of other things. And it's an aspirational goal to free associate, and there are many people who do not think this is a worthy thing to be doing anyway. But I do, and it does give you all kinds of information about how your mind works, what things it goes to. And after a while, you start to see where your mind goes under certain circumstances. When certain things come up, your mind goes to certain other things with a certain measure of reliability. So that's the procedure. But what is it that we really think we're doing there? And there are many other procedures. I don't tell people, oh, no, you're not free associating. You should be free. No, people can tell me anything they want and should to just speak their mind as freely as they can about whatever, because there are lots of ways to listen to people. But what the kind of psychoanalysis that I'm interested in privileges is the idea of an active unconscious mind. This is something that I don't know how easy it is for people to have a psychically valid experience of in everyday life in such a way that they become convinced of the existence of an unconscious, to put it that way. The unconscious mind is in felt, lived experience almost like having another person inside of you whose activities you are not aware of. When we say unconscious, we mean unconscious. They're not things you sort of know. That you could look at it that way. There are ways in which you do, of course, because it's your mind and there are things in it. But in a given moment, you do not know what your unconscious mind is up to. And this kind of thing is, it's easy to talk about. It's even easy to say you are a proponent of studying the unconscious. And there's all kinds of spooky ideas about it. I think if you were to watch 1950s horror movies in particular, the monster movies, they're all, shows like old TV shows like The Twilight Zone and the Outer Limits, and from these were late 50s, early 60s, some of them, and in them there's some sort of monster in most of them, and they're thinly disguised Freudian analogs. The idea that this monster is what's really inside the person, and now it's on the outside, and we're doing a more or less, generally less in the beginning, successful battle with it, and ultimately perhaps we vanquish the monster, frequently with some well-known, a jet of water or some sort of, I don't know, whatever it is we kill off those old-time monsters with. But this is what can happen when the unconscious is unleashed, is the moral of those stories. And society does not approve of what goes on in the unconscious monster come to life. So those are ideas from back then. But these days, I don't think you see so much of that in your, maybe you do, but in any case, we look to help people become aware and tolerant of what is unconscious and things that are linked together. One way one might come across the workings of their unconscious mind in an analysis or in a psychoanalytically oriented psychotherapy would be, let's say that I am having an interaction with a coworker, and that coworker tells me that they are going to a ball game with my other coworker, and I'm not invited. But they don't put it that way. But I see that they're going off with another person, and I'm left out. I'm going to feel jealous and envious, and there's a difference between those two things that probably worthy of another session later, but for now, I'll be feeling those things. I'm not gonna like it. I'm gonna feel sort of upset, and I'm gonna feel childish because I don't think I should feel upset. I think it's just fine and dandy that somebody's going off with somebody else and leaving me out. That's sure. What's not to like? But I think to myself, I'm going to tell my analyst about this and examine my childish feelings about it. That'll be a good idea. And then I go to the analyst, let's say the next day, and I'm thinking, there was something I wanted to tell you. And I can't remember what it is. Maybe it'll come to me. I don't know. It was something. It seemed it has something to do with work, but I can't remember what. And let's say the analyst says, "Do you think that what you want to tell me is embarrassing to you, and it leaves you feeling kind of childish, and that's part of why you wanted to tell me about it, but you're afraid of looking childish to me, or that maybe I would judge you for your childish feelings, and maybe that's making it difficult to remember." And I'm like, no, I don't feel that way. I'm very appreciative of your efforts. But I remember what it was a coworker of mine went off with another person, and I felt jealous and envious, and I wasn't too happy about it. And then, just for fun, let's say that I also say I had a little bit of the same feeling when the previous patient came out of your office, and I thought to myself, you're seeing other people, as well as me, and I don't like it. The analyst might say, well, maybe that's why it was hard to remember what had happened when you came in, because you were having the same feelings here. And I would probably say, well, could be, could be. But as an analyst, I say, yes, that's exactly what happened, is that this feeling of jealousy and envy may have been repressed, that is, to somehow have dived down into the unconscious mind, but was doubly so when I, let's say, saw the other person coming out of the analyst's office. And so now that's inaccessible to me. But when the analyst says something about it, like these were embarrassing feelings or feelings you were reluctant to tell me, I think the implication being because maybe you have them here with me too, then I deny that, but all of a sudden, boom, there it is anyway. And it is repeated experiences of that kind that leaves those of us practicing psychoanalysis certain that this is a robust model for how the mind works. That is, an active unconscious mind into which, let's say, to put it topographically like that, the experience can be pushed down or repressed, pushed out of awareness. The thing is, it's easy to say these things. It's easy to say these words. Things are suppressed and repressed, and they're in the unconscious, or this was an unconscious act on my part. It's another thing to have conviction about that and to see the world through that lens. It takes some measure of psychoanalysis or experience practicing it to develop a deep conviction that this is the way the human being works. I think, anyway. I think there may be people smarter than I am who figure this out. I think that the idea, for example, in classical antiquity of a Greek chorus suggests that human beings understood that there was almost an external part of ourselves that in that case, the Greek chorus is externalized unconscious, but a part of ourselves, by external there, I mean, not a part of us. It seems it's somehow communicating to us, but not as a part of us. And in the action, and that's a displacement to the exterior in the Greek chorus, but the idea that there's somebody telling you something that you should pay attention to. And our unconscious minds do that. They signal us and they direct us in many ways that are outside of awareness until they're brought into awareness. The thing that Freud points out about this that I find also fascinating is we don't know what's going on down there, let's call it, in the unconscious is something we'll also call it. It's a way of talking about these kinds of processes, but it's a little bit fanciful at the same time. But what Freud points out that I think is true is we don't know what is unconscious. What we know is there's something funny going on where there's a disruption in the normal flow of speech and thought in a person. For example, I forget what it was I was going to say, but it was something to do with something, and here I am in the analyst's office, and then maybe I start talking about something else. And we don't understand quite what happened there. I forgot something. But when the person is able to say, maybe it's like this, you felt this and you felt that, then all of a sudden it comes back what it was. And you could say, well, we don't know what it was when it disappeared. We know I had some thoughts and feelings and then they disappeared. Where they live in the unconscious and what form they take there, we don't know. It's a black box. All we know is when an interpretation is made or when the analyst says something about this that then causes whatever it was that we forgot or some other insight. It doesn't have to be just forgetting things. But that's a common one. But when something becomes conscious and then makes sense, oh, I had these feelings that led me to forget this. When they come back, they look like thoughts. It's as though thoughts and feelings were pushed into the unconscious and then came back. But we don't know. They live there in some way that is not easy to or not really possible to characterize. The reason that's so important is that the mind is functioning in a different way, unconsciously and non-consciously. It is also a form of unawareness that we have, like the ventral visual pathways and things like that, that function outside of our awareness, but they're not dynamically unconscious. Dynamically unconscious means we pushed them down there because we didn't like the feelings, and then eventually some procedure took place, somebody said something where they popped back up into awareness. This is what psychoanalysis really hinges on, in my view anyway. And there are many levels of organization of psychoanalytic inquiry, and there's an endless amount to talk about. It's part of what I'm writing my book to address. So it's not just so simple as to say, well, it's the unconscious, but the unconscious is central to the theories that underlie psychoanalysis, and it's central to my practice of psychoanalysis. I'm not sure what I would be doing exactly. I'm sure I would be a well-intentioned person and a helpful counselor, but I'm really not sure what I would be doing beyond that, and I don't need all the training I have to do that. Experience, yes, that it's good to be experienced as a counselor and to give people good advice and all that, but it's not really the business that I'm in. Happy to do it, and you get hopefully some high quality advice from me if that's what you want. But my further advice is pay some attention to what's unconscious, because that's what's causing all the trouble in the world in many ways, and that's something that we can look more closely at. For a little demonstration that may or may not work for you, but it's a fun thing to try, and that is, if you ever have the experience where you're talking with somebody and you suddenly forget what you were going to say, and that happens to me still plenty of times, where I'm just about to say something, or I'm having a conversation with somebody, and I want to interrupt them, but I don't. I stop myself, and then they say, I'm sorry, I think maybe I cut you off. What was it that you were going to say? And I say, God, I can't remember. Or I interrupt somebody and say, oh, I've got something I wanted to say, but suddenly I can't remember what it is. When you know what I'm talking about. When that happens, try the following experiment. Just try it. Think to yourself, oh, I've forgotten what I was going to say, and here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to think of the most embarrassing thing that's ever happened to me. Now, for me, that's no problem. The problem is choosing among the many embarrassing things that I have done or have happened to me, and which one was the most? And that's a good question. But I can pick one in any case, one that was very, very embarrassing, whether it was the most or not. And I'm not saying I'm thinking of that right now. Hey, guess what? I can't remember what it is in this moment, and I am delighted that that's the case. But if I put my mind to it, I can think of something very embarrassing that's happened to me. And if I think of that, if I say that's what I'm going to think of, frequently if you do that, if you really do it, if you really bring that to mind and imagine all the terrible feelings that come along with it, you will find not infrequently that what it is you've forgotten suddenly pops back into mind. And the idea is that all the repressive forces, whatever it is, and again, this is not, it is neurobiology, but we're not going to understand the neurobiology of that anytime soon, because it's a complex system. But whatever that is, one way of thinking about it would be, well, it requires all kinds of repressive forces to hold that other thing that you don't know yet why you forgot it. But let's just say that there was an unconscious reason for forgetting it. Well, all the repressive forces that had rushed in to hold that out of awareness now will rush over to your embarrassing experience and try to push that down out of awareness as hard as it can. And it fails, of course, because it's conscious now. But they release the previous thing that you'd forgotten, and then suddenly you remember it. This sounds magical and it sounds ridiculous, but try it. It works, and it works especially if you really inhabit it, which frequently we don't even want to do. But if you can, tell me about it. Do it and tell me when it works. And it's worked for me more often than not when I actually do it. And sometimes just thinking about doing it releases whatever it is, and it comes back to mind. But it's a fun experiment, and I wouldn't say that it corroborates the existence of an active unconscious mind. That you've got to come to yourself, and your life will be better for it. If you can recognize that there's this quality that we have. And maybe I'm saying something that's obvious to people. It wasn't obvious to me. I can tell you that. And, I'm sure that I was a benighted soul once upon a time. In fact, I can state that categorically, that there were things that you would think a person would know about that I really didn't know about myself or about the world. And that was one of them. I think there are other people, maybe more artistically inclined or I don't know, people who for some reason have a better intuition that there's a big part of themselves that they don't really know, and they respect that fact. They don't try to pretend it isn't so, or try to know everything all the time. They accept the fact that they are informed by and motivated by forces that are unseen plenty of the time. But many of the rest of us, and maybe the more obsessive compulsive we are, the less willing we are to accept this truth. But when one does, one has a better understanding of oneself, honestly. And in psychoanalysis, you can map out the pointers to the unconscious world and the types of things that it does to, for, and with you. And that's extraordinarily helpful in ways we can talk about. But that is, for me, the core concept that is underneath psychoanalysis, and I think unique to psychoanalysis and psychoanalytically oriented therapies. It's a different thing from many other tenets of many other kinds of therapy, and those kinds of therapies are good for what they're good for. But this one is a remarkable insight into human mental functioning and has been developed over the last century and a half or more. And it is of vital interest to me and the work that I do, at the very least. And I will leave it up to you if you think this is something that you might be interested in. But in my opinion, it should be. I remember a teacher of mine once said, because it's not surprising that the types of things that might find their way into an unconscious, a dynamically unconscious mind would be probably related to our old friends, let's call them sex and aggression. Those are two fairly conflicted areas for most people in one way or another. And my old teacher said, if you're not interested in the vicissitudes of sex and aggression in the human being, what are you interested in? And I thought that was a great question, I have to say. In any case, there we are, the unconscious mind, psychoanalysis, and that's it for today from The Geek.